everybody. Welcome back to I Was Thinking. I'm your lovely host, Simone. And as of this recording, it's just me, host-wise. But thankfully, I am not alone. I have a special guest that I was teasing about on part 1 of the BTS Arirang Extravaganza. Please welcome my lovely cult leader, Shay.
Okay, you didn't have to announce it like that, but it's fine. We're here. So this is now attempt number 3 on this podcast episode. So we're going to push through and then charge forward. But hello, everyone. I'm back, probably for the last time.
Oh, so you're just not going to come back anymore since we've tried to do this so many times? I understand.
It's okay. I'll come back as much as you need me to.
I appreciate that. If y'all can't hear the frustration in my voice, I'm just like, I'm breaking the fourth wall. I'm like over it because like Shay said, we've tried to record this like at least 3 times. This is the 3rd attempt. I don't know what is going on. I don't know what is happening in the universe. Is it my star sign? I don't know. Is it retrograde still? Whatever that means.
Mercury's in the microwave and stuff like that.
It's gotta be. But yes, I have the lovely Shay here. If you listened to when she was on 2 years ago.
It's been 2 years?
I think so.
Damn, you don't like me like that. I guess it's been a while, huh?
I mean, anyway, yeah, she was on here about 2 years ago. We did the album review for Namjoon's solo Right Place, Wrong Person. Mm-hmm. So I just thought it'd be fitting to bring her back for OT7, give us a little in-depth of like the producers they worked with, the lyrics, songwriters. So it's going to be a good time. But besides our 3rd attempt of trying to record this, how have you been, Shay? Just in general.
I am doing well. I am still out here pushing the pavement over the road. And not much has really changed in that aspect. I do not do social media anymore. Just didn't feel like the need. I mean, we have as I'm sure I'm sure that it has been talked about because you told me that it was talked about. We have a community in a Discord server that we have been cultivating, no pun intended, for about 2 years now. And I feel that I get just as much, like my endorphins are just as good as that than being on like social media and talking about BTS and everything related to it. So that has given me the avenue to still get that need met, but not in a public eye. So, but I'm around, still obviously, still out here kicking. Still, I am anticipating the tour. I know we're going to talk about this later, but we'll be seeing them really soon. I mean, it's like what 5, 6 weeks. You're seeing them.
I'm seeing them like 2 weeks, I think.
Is it 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, it's in about 2 weeks.
Damn.
Yeah, by the time this comes out, I don't know if it'll be the week I actually am in Tampa to see them. I'll see with like editing. And then I know I told the audience I'm in the process of moving. And then me being me, I wanted to be creative. And I'm painting 2 jackets. If you're on our social media, I painted a jacket for J-Hope. And I decided to do 2 this time. So yeah, I'm just very busy. But yes.
Achiever, girly pop.
I wasn't always like this. But anyway, not to be on that for too long. And I understand that too, because I'm not on social media either. I actually got rid of my TikTok during the first shutdown because I just couldn't get in it for some reason. But I just decided, you know what? It's not fun anymore for me. So I'm just like, I don't really need this. So the only social media presence I have is this podcast. Yeah. So I get you.
Yeah. I think it was me and the more dramatic shutdown, and we did a live and literally like watched the clock countdown, and we all like glitched out in America. It was real dramatic just for them to bring us back like 19 hours later. It was really kind of stupid.
That was really just like a lot of things.
I forgot about that, huh?
No, I didn't forget about it. I just try to block it out like many things, but trauma,
man. So I'll still be out here scrolling. I got some burner accounts. I'm just kind of, lurking and stuff. So I might be around, I ain't never gone too far.
No, you're always here somewhere in the shadows. So, but yes, so we are continuing our extravaganza, like I just said. So let's get into it before we actually talk about the actual album. So on January 4th, the official Weverse platform announced that BTS were releasing their 5th studio album and would be going on a world tour. The direct quote from that post was, "The new album holds significance as it marks the first album released by the group in 3 years and 9 months. I'd like to round it to 4 years, but yes, 3 years, 9 months at this time," while also indicating the direction the group will take going forward. The members were deeply involved in the creation of the songs, infusing their own thoughts and colors into them while musically expressing the emotions and struggles they've experienced along their journey. Featuring 14 tracks, the album is packed with honest stories that BTS wanted to share with ARMY, who have been waiting for their PM comeback as a whole group. The many attempts we've tried for this recording, I asked what PM meant, and I think Shay was the one who told me it must have meant post-military. So that makes a lot of sense. Filled with the music that's most true to BTS, the album is their heartfelt way of saying thank you to ARMY, who have been there this whole time. And then later on January 27th and 28th, we got, the tour sale. And that's when we also found out around that time the album was named Arirang. And yes, the shows in Korea have already happened. We'll talk about the actual concert later. I know Shay hasn't been watching the ones in Korea just so she can be surprised when she actually goes see them in Vegas, especially since they'll be there on her birthday. Lucky her. At least one of us will get to experience BTS on their actual birthday, and it didn't get canceled because of the global pandemic when they were supposed to come to your home state for the first time. It's fine. I'm still not bitter about that.
That sounds like a personal story. You know what I'm saying? That sounds like very, very near and true to your heart.
It's fine. It's been 6 years now.
6? Girl, let that hurt go. At least they're coming back to Florida before you leave.
I know. At least they are actually coming to Florida before I leave the States. So that's all I care about.
Right. We'll going away. We'll go away gift instead of the birthday gift, same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's close to my birthday anyway, so it's fine.
Right.
Just a few weeks before. But yes, we are also so very excited about this happening.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Yeah, man, it's been a I'll be transparent when it comes to all of the things that came out. I was in the process of transitioning from one job to another, and I missed a lot of things when they first came out, but I do recall being harassed by BTS for weeks with a certain catchphrase for this album, and being questioned every other couple of days about what my love song was. And I still kind of wake up in a cold sweat every now and again just thinking about it, So
I mean, you think the harassment was that bad?
It was, man. Listen, look, I don't have the answer, Namjoon, okay? I don't know what I'm you just want to be a romantic so bad, and I don't have an answer, okay? All of us don't have whimsical love lives and can, string that to the tune of a favorite love song, So it's fine. It's just more trauma I have to deal with.
They were just trying to get to know ARMY a little bit better. But Shay, do you know why they were harassing you with what is your love song?
I'm going to act like I don't know, even though we've done this 3 times. So why don't you tell us, Simone?
Well, thank you for asking, Shay. We didn't just go over this about 3 times. At this point, 4 times, if I want to be serious. So during the whole promotion, yes, we were, in Shay's word, harassed by what is your love song. The promotion also included other things like, hidden codes and quizzes on Spotify and Google. We have a whole subsection of ARMYs that I like to call theory ARMYs. So, they like to do that, get a theory, try to guess what the theming may be, what it might be about, et cetera, as well as millions of posters and billboards. And I know when it came to actual What Is Your Love Song, the biggest event was during Valentine's Day, and I believe Seoul, London, and New York. Let me know if I'm missing any other cities, but they had this huge rose wall where ARMYs were able to go and pick a rose from the wall. And once they picked all the rows that were loose and being able to pick off, the wall ended up spelling What Is Your Love Song? So it actually goes into the title of the album, Arirang. Obviously, if you're Korean, you already know this. But for all my non-Koreans listening to this, welcome to Simone's History Corner. Thank you. So Arirang is a traditional Korean folk song that is closely associated with the Korean culture identity of the Korean peninsula. So it includes North and South, despite the political division that we see today. It was actually during the 19th century that Arirang evolved from a regional folk song into a widely recognized symbol of Korean identity. During the Japanese occupation of Korea during 1910 to 1945, when the Korean language and culture were systematically suppressed, Arirang came to function as a symbol of cultural resistance and an expression of Korean identity. It's also associated with the concept of Han, a culturally specific term referring to a deep sense of sorrow and endurance shaped by Korea's 20th century experiences of colonial rule and civil conflict. So there's actually not like a modern word in Korean for arirang, and the original term is actually unknown. It may have like had a meaning or like derived from an archaic Korean word. That meaning has been lost. But one of the theories that some scholars have suggested is that Ari may have once meant beautiful and Rang beloved one. So also like thousands of regional variants of the song that existed. Most are sung like closely related melodies, especially for the version that is most known today. The lyrics commonly expresses themes of separation, longing, endurance, and love. And although there's not like an actual single version of arirang that's authoritative, a widely recognized version known as bongjo arirang or standard arirang associated with Seoul was popularized through the 1926 film Arirang. It is frequently cited as a representative example of the song, which I'm also assuming this is the version that is used in the song Body to Body on BTS's album.
It's definitely reminiscent of the past few years without them. I think it was a really good choice. At this point now we have had documentary, which further goes into the depths of creation of Arirang and them being like told the story of it, and which we'll get into in a minute. But I think overall choosing Arirang as a comeback album after being gone for military service and then like again transitioning in and out with members, it feels almost like a full circle moment, I think. And I think once again after we had gotten the documentary, I think even prior to that, knowing all of this, it was like, okay, like you guys are back in this bag of having all these like other meanings and these connections, not only with like your heritage and your culture, but also with your fan base. And I think it was a very wise choice. I don't think there could have been a better title or a better way to come back after being on hiatus for really wasn't a hiatus because we were harassed our entire military, enlistment. So it's, but I mean, for, as a whole, it's, I think it was a good choice. I'm actually, after we have done this now multiple times and talked about this at length in other places, I think as the longer we sit with this, the longer we talk about it, everything just feels very like faded in a way. So I think it would have been, and I think we also covered this last time about how their performance was like, what you said, 2016, like legit. And we said, I think there's like this thing going around on social media where it's like 2026 is the new 2016. So it's like they're just ahead of the curve when it comes to trends.
I mean, that's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that. You're right.
So we're really bringing back 2016 and they were like us first. And I don't know. I think looking back over it, like I said, I don't think could have been a better choice than what they chose to do with this album.
Yeah, especially when you learn like the themes express like separation and like longing. I mean, we all joked when they were in service, we were military wives waiting for our husbands to come home. So, I mean, they're just giving us that love song and love letter basically of their return. So it's like, you don't have to wait anymore. These are our feelings when we were in there, right, when we were missing you guys, and we're back. So
we're back to harass you more than we ever have. And it's been great. It's been wonderful.
Yes. But instead of harassing individually, it's harassing all seven.
As a collective, right. It's collective harassment.
Yes.
It's been great.
It has been. And very overwhelming. And speaking of overwhelming, promotions are always overwhelming. They come out with a tons of things. So there was also one thing that came out with the Arirang promotions before the actual album dropped, which was this little animation trying to compare when Arirang was first recorded and, making parallels of where BTS are today. Because another theme of this that they always talked about and like promoted before the album dropped was like, this was a way for BTS to like kind of go back to their roots And probably also show their old side and their new side to not only ARMY, but probably just like a newer audience as well.
Yeah.
So basically, we were discussing Arirang before and how there's a standard version, which is most well known today from that film in 1926. There's actually an earlier version that was recorded all the way back in the 1800s. So like we talked about, if you watch the documentary BTS The Return on Netflix or listen to part 1 of the Extravaganza when I recorded with Gina and Shannon, Big Hit had introduced the theme of Arirang to BTS when they were stuck on coming up with the concept for this album. They told them the story of the 7 Korean men who went to America for an education in 1896 and recorded Arirang, making it the first time the folk song was actually captured in a physical form. And then this led them to choosing the title Arirang and inspiration for the album as well. And like I said earlier, discussing their story and going back to the roots. And unfortunately, this animation came with, a little bit of controversy. It was trying to not compare, but like show parallels of BTS's story and the 7 Korean men. The Korean men were singing to students at Howard University because they were also students at Howard, where they show the Korean students recording Arirang and performing in front of the other students that were going to this university. And then it also like switched to BTS performing in front of armies and recording their own version of Arirang.
Yeah. So as we've done this again multiple times and talked,
we're just gonna keep telling you guys we've done this so many times. I'm sorry. Sorry if I'm stumbling. Like this
has been such a process, but I can't honestly say enough. Like I told Simone the last 2 days. First we recorded this and it was on Sunday, I think it was like a week ago.
Like last week.
Yeah, and it stopped recording and it went like away. Like we hit record again and the whole thing went away. And then we tried last night just for your part of the audio not to have been picked up by Adobe. So fuck Adobe, right? Anyway.
Even though I still have to pay them because I use their editing system. But I mean, at the same time.
Yeah. Well, we're going to try to find a different one too. But anyway, and now we're doing this now. But I think there's probably, I am a person that believes everything happens for a reason, even if it's frustrating with that reason. And I think I joked and said that the powers that be are trying to keep us from having this conversation about this controversy for whatever reason. Who knows who's going to listen to this? This may be putting it out there, manifesting now. It might be the biggest hit, on the page, on the podcast. And I don't know. I think if we didn't talk about it, we'd be kind of doing a disservice, not only to like what happened, but also to ourselves as Black K-pop stans, a biracial K-pop stan myself. And I want to like preface this before we even get into this, because it might be a little uncomfortable hearing people talk about things that aren't necessarily in the most positive light, but having concerns and criticism doesn't make you any less of a fan. It doesn't make you any less of a person who enjoys a group or loves members or the whole group. I mean, it's much like, in my opinion, having a child, which I have one. Sometimes my child does things that disappoint me, but I don't stop loving my child just because they do things that disappoint me. We just learn from it and we grow and we move forward, and we hope that these things don't continuously happen, because that's pattern and that's not a mistake. It's more or less like unchecked behavior. And I'm completely of the sound mind to think that, to know that more than likely BTS will probably never listen to this, but knock on wood or whatever. But my long-term goal for all of this, or long-term wish for BTS, and really, I guess you could even say K-pop as a whole, because this is something that affects K-pop, I think, in general, is that we become more open to the criticism if you're going to have representation of things and events that affect people that invest in you. So dialing it back to the situation with, the Howard animation, did you actually read about that, or are we just going straight into it?
Read about the articles Yeah, I mean, I was just going to go over my same notes of the article breakdown.
Cool.
Yeah. But I will say too, I mean, I think this is also relevant because you brought up the whole K-pop industry. I mean, this also applies if they're still going to continue with pushing in the West so hard, and if they're trying to gain more fans. And you know how K-pop is. I do feel like they got the formula down, whether it's ethical or not, because sometimes I still got my own problems with that, of keeping a fan base and loyal people to these idols. it's not really going to work in the West like it does when you're primarily promoting in like Korea or like other East Asian parts of the world.
Right.
And you have the West that is more, not only one, diverse, but two, part of the culture that you are taking from. Like if you're trying to promote and advertise to that culture specifically, you kind of have to earn our respect. But we'll also get into that a little bit more too, because I know you have more words about that or repeated words.
Want to kind of get the technical stuff out the way before we get into the opinions. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. I understand. But yes, let me go back into, what did I call it earlier? I forgot at this point. Was it Simone's History Corner? Simone's History Class?
Either way.
Let's get into yes.
One of them.
Let's get into talking about like the actual history of Arirang when it comes to the 7 Korean men and that recording. I actually came across an article that was called The Real Story of the Recording of Arirang by Boundary Stones. Article's also linked in the description below, written by Carice Lee. It actually was originally written back in 2020. I do think because they mentioned BTS at the beginning too, like when they were first having another, resurgence of becoming like talked about in America, especially I think around this time, Map of the Soul had just dropped. I don't remember if ticket sales were going on at this time because this was before we all went to lockdown. But yes, Map of the Soul was blowing up again. And then they updated it actually in March of this year. So I also do want to preference because I had brought up the Korean men in part 1 because one of the photos I kept like seeing, one of the men in the background, like, they dressed differently back then. So I think the hat was throwing me off because it looked like one of those hats women mainly wear. But it is been confirmed with all my research. It is actually 7 men. So they were all men. Just wanted to correct myself on that.
Right.
Yes. So we know the names of 6 of the Korean men. That's actually documented. And 1 is actually unnamed. But their journey to North America isn't really, the story we were sold and that was told to the guys either about like coming to America for an education, looking for a better life that they like to always say when you're coming to America, all these things. It was actually due to them stealing money from a Korean bank in the spring of 1896. And they ended up fleeing to Vancouver. They were stuck because they spent all their money traveling and couldn't speak or understand English, obviously, especially since we didn't have the technology back then for translations. They ended up visiting the Japanese consul and asking them to telegraph Su Kwanbom, who was the Korean envoy and ministry. I don't remember how to say this word. And we've done this 3 times already.
Yeah, I don't have my thing either. So
was it plenipotentiary?
We're gonna say it is.
Okay, it was something like that. Plenipotentiary to the U.S. who had empathy for the runaways and helped them since he could relate to fleeing to the U.S. out of necessity. There was also a Washington Post article published back in 1896 that covered the arrival of the 7 Korean students. And the article emphasized that they were sons of noble families, but don't understand a word of English. The article also called the story of the runaways somewhat wild and romantic. Sons of noble families and had established at a school in Japan, but instead of remaining there, they took it to their heads to acquire their education in the United States. And obviously, the article did not mention their theft at all. And too, with the animation that came out for the promotion of Arirang, there was actually a disclaimer, like before it even started, saying this video was inspired by the story of 7 young Koreans as documented in the Washington Post of May 8th, 1896, 7 Koreans at Howard. Now, that same article also discussed how certain professors at Howard were interested in their case and how the students would be distributed among the professors' families during like summer vacation. And the host would make it their business to coach them in the English language. It wasn't really discussed how like the students adjusted to Howard, but many stories suggested they were known for their musical abilities. They were considered solemn, sedate, and observing, and surrounded by a dozen persuasive, what we called back then, damsels, who begged them to sing. It was also stated that it seemed like their singing was more at the request of the damsels rather than the men like actually wanting to perform. But again, we're not really sure if that changed once they got like accustomed and comfortable at Howard. In the doc and in the article, it also mentioned Alice Fletcher, who was a white woman. She was a white woman and professor at Howard University. And she was also an ethnologist who is a scientist who compares and analyzes different human cultures and societies to understand their origins, behaviors, and relationships. She actually mainly focused and studied, as well as like documented, like Native American culture. But for reasons unknown, because even in the article it stated, like, we still don't really know why she invited the Korean students, but she invited 3 out of the 7 to come out to her house, and they ended up recording Arirang. And also to part of why we got like the marketing of, love song. She had actually marked certain parts of the recording of like what would be more considered a general love song, and had called the recording love song Arirang. So why am I bringing all this up? Like, what is the actual controversy in this animation? Well, the controversy is because if you're not familiar with America, because I know we have some international listeners, Howard University is an HBCU, which that stands for Historical Black College/University. A lot of these schools were known as colleges at first, but I know throughout the years they like upgraded to university. So that's why it's still HBCU. So in that case, historically Black, it means a majority of Black people went to these colleges for history we will talk about when we give our opinions. But when the animation dropped and showed the past of the 7 Korean men singing at Howard in front of what is known as Founders Library that's on the campus, when they panned over to the students stopping to listen to them, again, I said historical Black college. We had 3 baby Black people animated and like 70 white people animated. No matter if it was a second long, 5 seconds, 10, it was still a very inaccurate depiction of Howard back then, especially in 1896. I believe that was 12 years, if my memory is correct, when I searched this up, after slavery was officially abolished. And, again, America, some states still didn't even abolish slavery until
abolished, yeah.
Yeah, quote unquote, because, but anyway. So, yes, that was the biggest, thing that happened.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, I think it was abolished in the 1860s, if I'm right. So it's about, let's say 15, 20 years. We'll just round it.
Okay, but it was before Jim Crow, though.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was in that era between after slavery, but like kind of leading into Jim Crow. So there was still a lot of segregations between not only Black people and white people, but other, people of color who were starting to migrate into America at that time.
But the long and short of it is, it was when I first saw this animation, it was about maybe 4 or 5 days after it originally got released, because again, I was in transition from my last job into the job I'm in currently. And so I didn't get the initial blowback along with the response of social media, fans and non-fans alike. And when I first watched it, my knowledge of this story was very limited until BTS brought it, up to light, which, is kind of how this whole thing rolls. But knowing that the history of Howard University, my initial reaction was, well, this is like, the metrics are way off when it comes to what's being represented here around this time. And again, I'm not a alumni from Howard. I don't know anybody who went to Howard. But one thing that I think a lot of people were trying to, again, I call them the Wikipedia warriors. They all of a sudden have a master's in being able to Google and see who was responsible for such a school and why and all these things, and trying to use that as a way to combat or try to defend BTS and the actions that took place with all of this. My thing is this, I get there was a disclaimer. I mean, we talk about it. We've talked about this in length. It's funny to me that this is the portion of the promotions that were quote unquote fictionalized. However, to me, that doesn't really matter, because this animation, for the majority of people who watched it, who did not see a problem with it, looked at this animation as like a fated destiny type of situation. So the fact that these 7 Koreans came over to America, that parallels very nicely with BTS coming over here in their earlier years to study and learn and under Black people, ironically,
Yep.
right?
American Hustle life that y'all don't like to watch.
Yeah, the parallels are there. And when so much of it looks similar, it kind of doesn't matter, in my opinion, how many cops you plea to like cover your ass, because so much of this seems as like a fated destiny type of situation. There were 7 men, BTS is 7 men. They came to America and under a historically Black space. BTS came over here under some very historically Black spaces, recorded music over here. They've recorded music over here. Then it fast forwards or, flashes into the future, which Simone has an issue with for other reasons, of them being on stage, also doing, again, this fated destiny kind of parallel where it's like, these are the 7 men who came over to bring music to America or bring music to damsels, like fangirls, right?
Sure.
And so when you have that much parallel that is so close to the truth that it doesn't matter, in my opinion, that you put a disclaimer in the front that says some of this isn't fictional, some of this is fictional, because that's not how people received it. That's not how the fans are going to receive that. Now, again, the duality of being a Black stan in general is that you first have to be a Black person and then you can be a fan of a music group, whatever, right? Your Blackness in general. And I think, like, even for me as a biracial person, I tend to be very defensive over things that are misrepresented when it comes to Black culture, because in my opinion, as again, somebody who is biracial but who has, and for lack of better words, grown up around this culture my entire life. It's always been odd to me, this is beyond BTS, but it's always been odd to me how other cultures just take from our culture with little to no regard of how it's being represented once they take it. You know what I mean? So with this Howard thing, like, people were so hung up on the fact that, like, well, it just because it was a historical Black college doesn't mean it was for like only Black people that went there. No, correct. Historically Black colleges doesn't necessarily mean predominantly Black colleges. It just means that the history of this university and the reason why the university exists in the first place is because of the history that Black people have in this country. Without the history and without the slavery and without the need to have this space because we were not allowed in spaces, there would be no historical Black colleges, Black universities. It wouldn't be necessary to have those things. And so when you take away or when you whitewash that for the sake of pandering to the West, we'll just put it plainly, it really kind of just feels like a slap in the face a lot of the time. It feels like, once again, we are back in this space where it's like, okay, I see we haven't really learned a lesson. And it sucks to say that. It sucks to feel like sometimes your faves or whatever the case may be, just like it doesn't feel like, it feels like we're living like the same cycle over and over, but just with a different situation. Unfortunately, I think, and I'm always, obviously, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over because, again, we've done this 3 times.
It's fine. We know we've done this 3 times, but hopefully this will actually capture.
Just know, no matter what, we've done this 3 times. And so I'm trying to recall everything that I said earlier. But I want people, if anybody's really listening to what we're saying and not like immediately being offended, understand that what I'm critiquing or what anybody really is critiquing is BTS, the brand, not BTS, the artist. Because they are 2 different entities. The artist is the people that you see in the music that they put out and the craft that they spend time in. The brand is everything that helps them get their reach. It's the marketing, it's the PR, it's the interviews, it's all of those things. And yes, there's some overlap, but just because I have critiques and I'm disappointed in the marketing of this doesn't mean that I was disappointed in the project. And I think there's space for both of these things to exist. And I think that's okay. I think if you're the type of fan that only has praises for your favorite, you're really doing them a disservice by keeping them stagnant, keeping them comfortable. I mean, we'll get into this later, but like BTS's entire story is about being uncomfortable, like from their early days until now. Like there hasn't been a moment, I think, that BTS hasn't been under some kind of scrutiny. So they're not like naive to controversy or naive to stepping over a certain bound and, having to apologize and this, that, and the third. But drawing this back to the Howard situation, the reason why it was so disappointing, I think, for a lot of, and again, I'm not speaking for all Black people because we're not a monolith and we all don't think the same. And there has been a lot of back and forth on this. Every social media platform has had a group of Black people or a group of, insert ethnicity who have their own opinions, and it isn't being curated by anything but their own experiences. If you've never been to a Black university or you've never experienced like an HBCU for any reason at all, you may not feel the connection for that. And that's okay, that's your experience. But that does not necessarily negate the fact that something that is not sacred for the sake of like anything, but just, again, the history behind these HBCUs and what that actually did for the men who attended Howard. Because to dial it back to the reason why I think a lot of people felt some kind of way, especially people who have attended these colleges or who know all the history or whatever the case, those 7 Korean men that came over here would not have been able to do what they did had it not been for the fact that they were accepted to an HBCU. Because at that time, if you weren't a, to use modern terms, cis het white male, even if you were a white woman then, and if you noticed, we talked about, what's her name? Ari Fletcher? That's not her name.
Alice.
No,
isn't that a singer?
Ari Fletcher is not her name. Alice was a white woman. Yeah, girl, whatever.
It's fine.
Alice was a white woman. Now, Alice was a white woman teaching at a historically Black college. Why is that? Because if you're not a cis het white male back in those days, you're really second-class citizen. And if it wasn't for the need for Black people to have a space to get educated, no one else other than that specific group of people would have been able to be educated in that way. So it feels, again, like there's so much to unpack with it because you can't just like brush over that history because it is important. Those things are important to this entire story. Our cultures blend a lot of the time. There's so much, and I think more than anything, it was just a missed opportunity, I think, to really highlight the influence, but also the like juxtaposition of Black culture and Korean culture by way or Asian culture in general. Like, again, I grew up, just personal story. I grew up around lots of like Black and Asian relationships and like lots of that dynamic. And when I say we have so much in common, like, it's not like me just like placating just to be like, we for whatever reason, it's just like we do. Look at the hype around the Sinners movie, even like that whole, we see more of that as well. But that's actually, there's some real history there in Mississippi with Chinese and Black people back then. So that's not just like a one-off thing. A lot of the people of color have a lot of similarities. And yet, for whatever reason, the anti-Blackness that happens, whether it is on purpose or by accident, it just tends to seep in everything. And I think this is just one of those situations. And when looking at it in hindsight, I think what was disappointing about it for me, just my own personal opinion, is once again, just the ability to be able to take something that could have been like that moment of this unity. And I guess we're not owed that, or anybody's really owed that, but like it would have been a really good moment, I think, to just really highlight that aspect, because no matter what, BTS, the brand, has the ability to spark interest in whatever they put their hands on. So the foot traffic to this story was going to get there regardless because of who BTS is as a brand. But now you have this this kind of stain on it because for whatever reason, the brand chose to take the liberties to undermine the significance of why. And for whatever reason, again, I wasn't in the room when they decided why they needed to cut these things or not highlight these things. But without that piece of the puzzle, this story doesn't exist. That's just really the long and short of it. So I'll stop there for now and let you give your thoughts and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and plus too, like Shay had mentioned, not every Black person is a monolith. Personally, for me, I live in a town where I am in Florida where there is an HBCU, but my HBCU was founded and created by a Black woman. So I guess, not really being told anything different. I always assumed all of them were founded by Black people and like was predominantly Black people as well. I didn't go to that HBCU as far as like for my college education. I did go to a predominantly white institute or what we call them a PWI. And when I was younger, I actually did, fun fact, I used to be like a cheerleader when I was like tiny. So I actually used to cheerlead for them. But anyway, that was just my own. I thought it was all like that until this whole thing happened, realized it wasn't. And I knew like later in the years, obviously they're accepting for everyone. I just didn't realize that early on since the beginning, they were like that. Because Shay is right. Like other, races and ethnicities, if you weren't Black, were able to go to these places because they weren't accepted. And these predominantly white places, they were considered colored back then. You'll see that word everywhere if you look at like history. It's just also disappointing because it's like, I understand this was supposed to be about BTS. Obviously, it's about their album release coming back. But it's like, if you're going to talk about, and we'll get into this later too, because people had issues with the title of Arirang. But if you're also going to talk about like what led to the inspiration of titling that, like keep the history somewhat accurate. Like, I don't understand what was the point of saying this history isn't inaccurate, because like Shay had mentioned, I didn't just have a problem with the way Howard was represented. I had a problem with the way like BTS was represented in that too, because when it switched to them performing in a stadium, the year says 2013 and they're performing Wings. Like, we all know, especially if you're an ARMY, whether you're like newer or you've been here for a while, we all know how broke Big Hit at the time before they became Hybe, which again, they became Hybe because of BTS and their success. They were pretty much on the brink of bankruptcy for a lot of early BTS's career. They have talked about that. They especially talked about why they had to pivot from such heavy hip hop concepts when Dark and Wild came out, because the sales weren't good, into the more like, well, I technically considered the Most Beautiful Moment in Life, or like HYYH, like more R&B, but it was leading into like the pop sound that they were having for a while before they enlisted. But that also doesn't really show their true roots. If this is them going back to their roots, you're not showing that they started off like as a hip hop group, the struggle that they went to get to where they are. Like, even if the animation was a little bit longer, I would have rather have seen that and been more prideful, not only with like the more accurate representation of Howard, but like the accurate representation of BTS, because they didn't start as popular coming out the gate. And that's another thing too, why people love them so much, because which also sometimes I feel like does a disservice to them, because of that underdog story that they had starting out, and literally, as we like to say, like pulling themselves up by the bootstraps and working their way to the brink where we've almost had disbandment a couple times, that they've opened up to us later on, to where they are now and wanting to continue not only as a musical group or musical artist, but like as BTS, as the whole seven. So it's just really disappointing in that. And then like Shay had mentioned, because I always bring up American Hustle Life, I ended up watching that show a little bit later, and I watched it in full. I know people have their problems with it. I know it's a little bit cringy, but I do think it really does show, like, there are some segments where like Julio and like Warren G, where they're literally teaching BTS Black history, not only just like the music and hip hop. There was a part in one of the episodes where it asks them like, what does the fist mean? And like, where did that come from with the Olympics and why? And they had to answer questions on that in groups. Like, they actually learned some Black history on that. So just to take all of that away, it's like, so are we really highlighting BTS's roots if we're talking about their roots as a musical group? And then I have mentioned this before too, probably on other episodes on this podcast, and the many renditions we've done of this recording. I've also noticed the shift as far as BTS, the brand, when it comes to, as they've been pushing more into the West. I don't know. And again, this could come into like colonialism and like white supremacy that's spread throughout the world. If you have like the white man's approval, then like you've made it. Because I've noticed the shift with when Idolhead came out around the time I started becoming a fan, and the remix with the person who shall not be named for many reasons. At the end of that music video, they show a lot of fan clips they got online of them, of like armies doing the Idol challenge. And I was so impressed by like the diversity I saw in that. I joked to Macy when I saw them in MetLife back in 2019, how she was the minority for the first time, and how I felt so comfortable with seeing so many Black people there, so many like Asian people and other like Hispanics, and just like so many people of color. compared to as we've gotten forward to like after kind of during the pandemic and a little bit after, where they like released one of the English trios, Permission to Dance. And when they did do like a fan segment of people doing the dance, just noticing the complete opposite and lack of diversity of the fan videos they chose to show people doing the Permission to Dance. And just even with interviews too, like when they go to certain places and they show the audience and the crowd, I noticed they show mainly white people, and like maybe I can spot out a black person or two, but when they aren't in Korea, it's just very interesting the type of fans they choose to try to show that are into BTS. So it's just another part of the erasure that we already have to deal with. And another thing I mentioned too in the other recordings, like obviously we have a history of like basically being erased. You know, we weren't originally from, well, no one except for Native Americans are originally from America. We were stolen literally off our land from different parts of the continent, Africa, put together, had to learn how to talk to each other because people were from many different tribes, had many different languages, which again, where AAVE comes from. That's how we had to learn how to talk to each other, and just kind of, you know, I guess knowing that we felt that way and that's where our history is, that's still embedded in us. We're very welcoming as a people. We try to be sometimes. Again, we're not all a monolith, because like when Shay was talking about different Black people talking about this online, I got from, you know, the actual people who listen to BTS and their fans, the Black armies talking about their concerns about it, their disappointments as well. And then to the Black people who don't listen to K-pop, which again, I've always say this, I'd never blame any Black person who has their problems with K-pop. I completely understand. And I'm not going to sit here and argue with you because I get it. That's actually why I didn't listen to K-pop for the longest time until I got into BTS. But I will say there were some people you can tell were just trying to use this for clout. Then all of a sudden it starts getting into like Black people who don't, or Black people who do like K-pop. Y'all are coons. How can you know, enjoy this genre who takes so much from us? Y'all are a disappointment to the community. I'm like, okay, now we're kind of going off too far. It went from one thing to like trying to be educational to now you're actually blaming the Black people because we listened to this.
I mean, and you know, again, we've covered this, not even with like, it can't obviously stop bringing up the mini recording. But I think one thing just to tie this kind of into us being accepting, which will kind of go in, I guess, into the next segue with the response of Howard University. When it comes to Black people and enjoying anything, like there's not a whole lot in our day-to-day lives that isn't rooted in white supremacy and anti-Blackness. I mean, shit as insignificant as like the master bedroom. That's directly comes from plantation houses and literally master's bedroom, but that's now a staple in homes, just modernized. It's just like things have never been rectified from those years of chattel slavery. And, you know, going back to, I think there's a lot of people, and I've seen the sentiment, but no one ever really says it because they feel like, I guess if they say it, it makes them feel or look racist. But I'm going to very blanketly talk about this point. I see a lot of sentiment around like every time insert artist, but for this, we'll talk about BTS. Every time BTS does anything that's closely related to Black people, whether it is collabing, whatever the case may be, it feels like Black people always have something to say or something that it's just quote unquote not good enough or it's not represented correctly or whatever the case. And I'm not saying this is like the answer solution to all and every, because I again, we're not a monolith. So it's like, I can't say this is 100% the reason why you see anytime our culture is being represented incorrectly or something's not being shown in the best light, why we get so up in arms about it or why we're like talking about it or advocating for ourselves about it. And again, I have no studies for this. I don't have any statistics for this, but in my opinion, I think that's just unhealed trauma from our ancestors. We've never, as community of Black people who exist here in America, who have ancestry of people who built this country, we've never received recognition. We've been told all of our lives to just get over it. There's just so much of basically erasure that happens to the point that they're literally trying to erase it out of our government systems and our libraries, and critical race theory is becoming like non-existent. There's so much of that happening in a day-to-day walk for most Black Americans that it almost is like a trauma response. It's almost expected for our culture and the things that are sacred to us to be kind of taken, bastardized, repackaged, renamed, and utilized for popularity. And anytime we say, hey, this is actually something that's significant to us, it's for everybody. Well, we didn't say that you couldn't use it, but the least you could do is represent it properly. I think that's the bare minimum. And I don't think that's too much to ask for a culture that you continuously take from to represent it correctly, because you would want your culture to be represented correctly. I think it's just that's what it means to exchange cultures and to have that respect. I can't tell you how many times in my beginning of getting into K-pop, I watched video after video of not just Koreans, but white people, Black people, anybody who's visited Korea in the last, 5-6 years, teaching us that have never been to Korea how to conduct ourselves in Korea because of respect, because of their culture. And it's like that is never forwarded to us. But the flip side of that, which again will tie into the next part of this, is that I honestly do also believe that, again, the duality of Black people, we're very welcoming. We're very forgiving. We give a lot of chances because we know what it's like to be othered and ostracized and kind of put at the bottom for the sake of other people to get ahead. And yet we continue to open the doors and not gatekeep the things that bring us joy, because tying this into the Howard thing, what's good for Black people, and especially Black women, 99% of the time, that's a big, statistic, but like I'm going to stand on it. 99% of the time, if something's good for Black women, it's probably good for most people. I mean, I can't say how many videos I've watched of, just segueing out of that, just like Black women traveling and giving their opinions on countries they visited. And I see people in the comment sections, of different ethnicities just being like, now I feel a lot more educated, and I know that if it's not safe for you, it's probably not going to be safe for me. And again, I'm paraphrasing. That's not like verbatim a comment I've seen, but it's the sentiment. And even like, again, tying it back to the Howard situation, because there was a need for Black education, because that's what the people who created these universities set out to do, that in turn opened the door for other ethnicities to be taken in and given an education, women to be taken in. And again, if it's good for Black people most of the time, and it helps progress us as a community, it is more than likely good for the rest of society. And we tend to invite people in without really any merit, which is something I love about Black people for sure. Like, it is something that I admire, that we are just so welcoming. I mean, I can't tell how many spaces I've been in that are typically what you would call like a Black space, that you would see just some random other, and they're not treated like other. They're treated like family.
It's inviting them to the cookout, which I'm tired of saying, but
yeah, I mean, that's a whole thing. Like, I've said that shit about BTS members who I think could be invited to the cookout. There's no cookout. The cookout has never happened. I mean, it has, but it's that sentiment. Like, again, we know what it's like to feel othered. We know what it's like to be belittled and having things diminished and taken from us. And the last thing we want to do, for whatever reason, some people do, again, we're not a monolith, some people do, some people don't, is gatekeep safe spaces. So with that being said, Howard did respond to everything and have some opinions on that and that tie into that sentiment.
Yeah, and I'm not sure who wrote this article. I'm not sure if this is someone a faculty member that works there, or a student that goes there, and this is their publishing, in the university. But yes, like Shay stated, they did put out their own article, and it briefly talked about, the Korean students that went there back in 1896, as well as brought up BTS's comeback, because this was, I think, after the album had dropped. I can't remember, but the article is in the description as well. And also the way K-pop in general is influenced by Black American music, specifically music that was popular in the 80s and 90s. So when it actually came to them discussing the animation, they did talk about how not only Howard, but HBCUs in general have always been about providing academic opportunities for everyone. Like we've been talking about, to debunk the myth that only Black students attended, and even mentioned their class, the academic year of 1896 to 1897. Their student body included students from Honduras, Japan, the West Indies, various African countries, and of course, Korea. And I am assuming from this statement too, I think this is the first time they actually had students from Korea as a country, which I also think was why this was such a big deal. And the reason why they wrote that, like Washington Post as well, because it's the first time they had like students there from the country of Korea. And they also did mention and highlighted their own K-pop cover dance performance group that they have there called One Oak in the article.
Yeah, and again, I'm not looking for a witch hunt by any means. And again, I'm not really sure who wrote this article either. I mean, I'm sure, like, again, the article's, like you said, posted in the description. And this is no shade to that person. But the only way things are going to change is if things are brought to light. And I don't know how helpful this article was in giving BTS, the brand, a pass.
Yeah, I see that.
That's kind of what it felt like. It's kind of what it felt like. It felt like, oh, this happens, but we, again, accepting, welcoming, nurturing, those are all qualities that Black Collective has. And for our benefit or for our downfall, I think this is also why we never can really get on one page when it comes to the conversation of appropriation versus appreciation. I've talked about this in length when I used to do social media, because we can't decide what is sacred to us, what is not. Again, just this conversation with HBCUs, the whole, the Wikipedia warriors that in the comment sections of people, especially Black Army, that were talking about this, basically trying to get a gotcha moment or aha moment, because it was founded by a white man. But then you have to take that and be like, well, why was it founded by a white man? Why did a white man have the ability to create a space for Black people? And why was that necessary? That if you keep peeling back the layer, the answer is not going to be white people are the savior. It's because white people are the villain. I didn't mean to say that, but yeah.
Listen, it's fine. I've talked about these things before. I've tried my best to talk about these things as
sensitively,
best as I can throughout this whole podcast in general. But like you said, we're gonna have those uncomfortable conversations. So it's and we want to be real.
Yeah.
This is us being real. We're not trying to villainize white people. We're not trying to say all of white people are bad. Obviously not. I just had 2 white people in part 1. Right. And even they somewhat agreed when I brought this up. So it's there comes to a point.
Yeah, it's not white people, it's white supremacy. That's really what it boils down to.
The concept of whiteness.
The concept of honestly, whiteness being close to godliness truly is what it feels like. And anything that's not white isn't right. And you peel back the layers of why. If you just keep asking why, eventually you'll get to an answer that's going to be uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people don't do that enough. Because if you peel back the layers of why these HBCUs exist in the first place, again, you're going to have to feel that guilt as a person who is connected to that in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But yeah, during that time, and I think it would, again, Howard University's response, it wasn't like I was disappointed again. I just was it was almost like I expected that. I did not expect them to go again with a witch hunt. I don't want anybody to go with a witch hunt against BTS, because that's not the point. The point isn't to reprimand, it's to educate and to make amends and be hopeful that these things don't continue to happen, because if they continue to happen, I mean, it's only so much that fan base that as a Black fan can take. It's only so many times that, we're going to feel shunned and othered before. Again, there's been a lot of people that have left. I mean, I obviously don't know people in specifically, but I mean, I'm pretty sure if you looked at the demographics and looked at the decline of the interest of K-pop in general, not just BTS, probably a lot of Black people have left because of just the blatantness of not giving a fuck about these things. And long story short, and bottom line to all this for me, so we can maybe move on to the next controversy, and obviously after you make your final statements, the goal of all this, of even talking about it, is number one, to feel seen, to feel like we're not crazy and we're not, we're being validated in some kind of way. And the goal, in my humble opinion, is that I just hope eventually HYBE really does, especially with a group like BTS, who is trying to appeal to a global market and have Western validation, which I don't have a problem with. I mean, a lot of people think it's stupid for artists to want the recognition of their art in any facet except, I guess, where they come from, which is stupid, but whatever. If you're going to try to keep appealing to a global market, you have to understand that the global part of it is, you have to take that in consideration when you're putting anything out, because you don't want to continue to sully the brand if you want genuine relationships with fans. And I'm not talking about parasocial. I'm just saying, if you want this general dynamic of this transactional relationship we have to continue to thrive, you have to really be mindful of what you're putting out and what message you're sending in the message that you're trying to send. Because everything has a subliminal. Anything can have a subliminal. And from what a lot of people I saw talking about this, and myself included, this is another example of us being looked over and kind of erased. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the long and short of it. I just want, I wish in the future there's some kind of liaison that is of the global majority, that is not Korean or white. Hate to say it, but I mean, the whole company is probably full of Korean or East Asians, and white people don't have the, this is going to sound like a slight, but it's not. White people don't have the depth to be able to cover the things that come with being part of a global majority. That's the nicest way I can say that without having some kind of bias. And yeah, I hope that eventually they really do take in consideration, especially because it's not just BTS, like their entire company is trying to reach a global market in some way or form or fashion. They're touring over here. They're selling stuff over here. Like, they're promoting over here.
I mean, most of their interviews have been over here, if you haven't noticed. I mean, I know there's other things that go into that happen with BTS during their military, but if you notice, they haven't done any type of like Korean interviews unless they were variety shows on like online.
Yeah. It's all been American or Western in general. Like, I don't know if they've done anything in Europe or, UK or whatever, but
they might when they go on tour.
Right. And so if you want to appeal to the global market, you have to take the global market into consideration and understand that you're not going to get it perfect, but you can at least try better. You can try to do better. I would accept an effort over just blatantly disregarding any day of the week from a company, for sure. Because, at the end of the day, it's still very much like fuck companies, but kind of the world we live in.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much said everything that I want to point out. I think my next thing that I'm going to talk about kind of goes into our next controversy topic. That still kind of deals with the animation. It goes back to when I was talking about, if we want to bring this back to like BTS 2, my problem with like also erasing their roots as like a history, or not history, their roots as a musical group in this, when it comes to like the history, isn't this technically part of your culture as well? Because I mean, I'm not trying to frame this as like American savior type thing that sometimes, even though I'm not white, but like Americans in general sometimes do, whether we mean to or not, end up portraying. But it's like, how we have known Arirang would have been recorded if they didn't come to America back then. I mean, yes, I know people complain, especially if you're not from here, that like we try to center America and everything, and like no one has to know everything about American history. But it's like, well, if we want to just talk about the 7 Korean men and the way that Arirang is so like sacred to Korean people, this is technically your history. This is technically Korean history. So why are we also erasing Korean history? And the reason I say it kind of goes into our next topic is because when the album did kind of officially, release, many people, fans and non-fans alike, were, I guess the nicest word to say is confused about the album when it was released. I mean, if it was just about BTS themselves, many were claiming like this wasn't the BTS they knew. They missed the old BTS. And then once again, what we've been talking about, how they're trying to pander to the West. But oddly enough, the biggest thing about this album, especially with being a majority of English lyrics, was questioning their Koreanness and asking if they were Korean enough, as well as, if they were basically Korean enough, especially choosing a name like Arirang with a very deep Korean meaning to it. And we did find out what we talked about, like the documentary in part 1, as well as the Studio Notes Live, which is like a live BTS themselves did like an hour after the album released. They actually predicted kind of like this might be controversy or talking points among people, and like expressing their worries about like naming it after a such well-known folk song among Koreans. I do think they were more worried about the response they were going to get on the Korean side than the international side, but it's just wild. I've been seeing on like the international side outside of the country, Korea, of people questioning their Koreanness. And there's also like a personal like K-pop podcast I listen to. I'm not going to name any names, but I guess to say go over K-pop, they did talk about the album when it was released. The questions about like, is the album Korean enough, especially with like the, Korean promotions as far as the leading up to everything we just talked about. one of the hosts who was born in like Korea and raised in Korea before he moved to the United States talked about how this could probably represent Korea and Seoul today when it comes to like only caring about sales and results. They also brought up like when people hear, which I did agree with in some way, like when that they want more Korean, why do people think about like traditional Korean, not like modern Korea? But like I kind of wish they expanded upon that because I'm not a person who lives in Korea as of today. I don't know what modern Korea looks like. So I would have loved to heard more about like, well, what modern Korea are you thinking about that you wish they interpreted them, even though you're not really an army. But again, this album isn't for armies only consumption. So you're going to get people who either don't care about BTS or like are casual fans listening to it anyway. That's not my point. But then they also too brought up that with the title like Arirang, they thought that BTS throughout this whole album was going to talk about like the struggles of being Korean overseas, especially blowing up in the West, and not have it in just one song. We will talk about the album. And I know for that last part, when I heard that, I was like, I get it, like, especially when you start out, and there's a lot of other artists too that do talk about their struggles that people want to hear and they can relate to it as well. But like, don't you get to a certain point, especially if you get older or like you're trying to expand your musicality, doesn't that get tiring? Doesn't that get like triggering to like always talk about your trauma? I feel like that's also putting you in a box. Like, do you just not want them to be happy? Is that what you're telling me? You don't want these artists to actually express some type of joy ever in their life?
Yeah, I think with that, just before we go into the, the other stuff with that specifically, there's something very relatable about struggle. Struggle is a universal like emotion or result of like our everyday experience. And so when you find an artist who, again, there's a reason why I think a lot of artists who make like what you call like sad boy music are so popular, because again, everybody, no matter what your situation is, no matter financial situation, cultural situation, it doesn't matter where you live, everybody goes through their downtime. Everybody goes through a down and a low. Everybody gets low. And there's something about struggle that humanizes an artist groups as big as BTS. When they are speaking in these brackets that none of us are able to touch because we ain't got that kind of money, it kind of makes them feel more distant and like
unreachable.
Yeah, I don't know why I was struggling so hard to say that.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's been a long couple of days. Yeah, it makes them feel kind of out of reach is what I was trying to say. It makes them feel further than they already are. I mean, literally, really can't get close to them as it is, but something about struggle and the type of struggle that each member went through and the collective group went through, I think it resonates with people, which is why the Love Yourself era and the Wings era and the HYH era, which kind of both, and those eras were so sought after. And I think a lot of people wanted that again, because those of us who weren't here during those eras didn't get to experience that, but we got to experience it on the back end, and we wanted an authentic moment. And not me, I'm saying we as in the people who think like this wanted that authentic moment that's similar to that. To back up a little, conversation around BTS and this album not being Korean enough, like hard stop, them being 7 men born and raised in Korea with Korean roots, that is enough. Like period, point blank, regardless if they're speaking in Korean or they're speaking in Konglish or whatever the fuck they call it, or they're speaking in anything that is relatable or understandable to the global majority, them being from Korea, Korean roots, is them being Korean enough. Now, I cannot necessarily, and I will not go over Koreans if there were any, but I didn't see them. But I don't, and that's not my timeline's just, because my timeline gives me all the controversy. So I can't even say my timeline's just give me the positive. It doesn't. It gives me every fucking thing that, because my algorithm knows I like drama. I do. I like the drama. Because I like to hear people's organic thoughts and their raw thoughts and not the predictable shit. And while I do think, we'll get into this later, there are some critiques that can be had with this album, them not being Korean enough and the album not being Korean enough is a very weak excuse and a very weak, or very just, it's very childish in a way, because we do this, but people do this with other, I would say other types of music, but not as much, it feels like, with this particular genre. And it's funny because this genre is literally a melting pot of other genres. K-pop doesn't really have its own unique sound. It never has.
No.
And it's just a amalgamation of many other different genres. So if you take that away, that can't be the reason. So, okay, the English lyrics, I mean, they've had English lyrics all throughout their discography. It might not be the most, and I said this before we even got the album, and when we got the track list, I made a statement in my Discord server that this was going to be their most English-leaning album that they've done to date because of who was connected on this album. And I was right. So I just wanted to put that out there. I was right. Listen to me. I'll be right all the time. Anyway, but it can't be that because they've had plenty of songs. Their solo projects full of English. And some of that was some of y'all's favorite shit. So we'll take that off. The only other possible, like, in my mind, the only other possible scenario where you think it's not Korean enough is because you want them to put on essentially a minstrel show. And that's weird.
Well,
you need to unpack that because, and again, I'm not going to say it's solely a certain type of person that's online talking about this, but I will just say if you're not Korean, that ain't your business. You are only here to consume and listen from a consumer perspective and not from a, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't get to make any judgment calls. And you don't get to do that when it comes to what they choose to put out. If you don't like something, that's one thing. But to say if something's not this enough or that enough, that kind of comes up a little bit racist. So maybe you should check that. But we won't go. I'm not your therapist. We won't go into that. But yeah, really, honestly, hard stop. Them being Korean is enough. Like, if they decide to do a fully English album, they would still be 7 Korean men doing, and that'd be still Korean enough.
Yeah, and I've seen like Koreans of the diaspora, meaning like Korean people who either left Korea very early on for whatever the reason is, or like were born and raised outside of Korea. So like America, Canada,
Australia,
somewhere in Europe, like you name it. So I have seen some of them have been like, I haven't seen them questioning BTS's Koreanness, but like there's one girl that I do come across her posts a lot, and she was talking about how she just watched the documentary, and this was new for me as well. And I feel like I can kind of relate to this because we have this ourselves with like Black Americans and, like other Black people from other countries, as well as like Black people from like Africa. I guess the documentary was kind of triggering her a little bit when they were discussing the album, because they reminded her of like people always questioning her Koreanness because she grew up in America. And even from Koreans themselves, like from Korea, like saying she wasn't Korean enough because she grew up in America. And then like, other races in America, like they see her as Korean, but like, so that I could understand as well. But it just really baffled me when it came to like Koreans, like BTS, born and raised in first language is Korean, because the one time they want to put in more English in an album, which you would think more people, especially who speak English, would be more happy because you can actually sing along to the lyrics. We don't have to butcher Korean or like mumble the words. I'm sitting here wondering, like, is it true that like a lot of y'all wouldn't like K-pop if you understood the words more? You got to check that as well. So, but yeah, that's what I was just thinking too. So, and like, you don't see people questioning other K-pop groups. Are they Korean enough? Because I don't know if people realize this, or this is another like blindness to like, you just see an Asian person. So like, you just don't really question where they from in Asia. But it's like, y'all do know there's tons of K-pop groups where not all the members are Korean, right? I can name like 10 off the top of my hands right now. Or even if they are Korean, like I stated, they're from the Korean diaspora. So they might be Korean Canadian. They might be Korean Australian, New Zealand, whatever. So it's like, to have a group, all 7 members, well, again, born and raised in Korea, were questioning their Koreanness off of an album just because it has English words in it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it's this strange part of the parasocial relationship that falls into this entitlement, I think, because again, I think a lot of people, for the most part, when I heard people, because again, I think there was obviously a drop off. And from what we talked last time, there is now more controversy that we probably won't get into because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But it ties a little bit. But the initial controversy and all the, backlash of it not being Korean enough and the album being bold or whatever has kind of died off. And I think we talked about it before with like that is the internet wave, the social media wave. There is a sudden spike in just being negative, and all of a sudden it drops because nobody cares. It's not the popular thing as far as the trends go and as far as like the cycle of what's popular in social media. There was a creator put out a video who before that didn't have any content really. And I remember because I told you on Discord, just take it. Don't respond to these people because again, you respond to these people, you bring more traction to their videos. They're getting money off of that.
Yeah.
Negativity, if a negative post typically, and I'm sure, we've talked about this in length with people like Shannon and Discord, like that, those negative posts bring in people who are so ready to defend or so ready to like talk shit about you, not realizing that a lot of these people are rage baiting you to boost their numbers so they can get a check, so they can buy the seats that you didn't get for the concert. And I just feel like if y'all would just stop feeding into the bullshit, it's hard. I get it. Everybody wants to just like have a get back, and I get that, but like people are going to talk, and obviously you can't stop the train of negativity. It just is what it is. But I said it to say there's an entitlement, I think, that comes from the parasocial parts of this fanship relationship or whatever, this exchange where it's like, you're not fitting in the box that I put you in. You're trying to get out that box. And that's not what I paid for. I paid for you to be in this box and you to be the person that I want you to be and the music that I want you to do. And we talked about this earlier, that a lot of people, in my opinion, wanted another Love Yourself era, but just post-military. But they're not the same people they were in the Love Yourself era. They are post-military. They have experienced more shit in the last few years, And again, I think a lot of people were also, and this is a different, string of thought, a lot of people were ready for them to come back and talk their shit. Not to say that BTS is above it, because I think that we've seen many times before them taking jabs and, talking against certain things, and that there's a time and place for that. But also, I think you had brought this up in the last recording. The chokehold that a lot of fans in this fandom have when it comes to wanting them to be angry and like the starving artist and the helpless and that you always need the help of ARMY. Like there's not a moment that goes by that BTS doesn't acknowledge ARMY's existence and gives them the props for where they are today. They never again have to ever say ARMY's the reason why we're here. We know, they know that is solidified. But for whatever reason, I think people feel justified in feeling like their best work is when they were angry and when they were outraged and when they were like depressed. And like looking at Yoongi's story with August D, people were expecting August D to come back out, but he's not there anymore. He's let that go. He's healed from that. And I think, to tie in the shit that happened during his military time with scooter incident, I think a lot of people were just really, especially a lot of fans, because I can't necessarily say it was people on the, like, there's been like two ways of this. The people who are like locals and who heard about BTS or are anticipating this because it's so talked about. And then there's fans. And I think some fans were really just waiting on Yoongi to come pop his shit. And in my opinion, I think what he's doing is the right move. I think him being avoidant and busting through that damn airport in like record timing until Namjoon got hurt. And then he slowed that pace down a little bit.
Listen, that just shows his love for his brothers, okay?
Right, it shows his love for Namjoon because somebody got to take care of that big oaf.
I'm just praying for him for the rest of this tour, okay? We don't need any more injuries. No more.
He would be the one. Like him, because like Tay will just sidetrack. Tay will slide all over the fucking stage with no problem, but Namjoon takes a step out of place and he's got a torn ACL. Not putting that in the universe.
Okay.
But
this isn't spoiling anything. This isn't spoiling anything.
Uh-huh.
I literally watched a clip from the sound check from this morning. Tay literally ran off the stage to one of the side stages, jumped over the barricade so he can be closer to the fans. And you see security like 5 seconds later trying to catch his ass. Like, sir, I know you were in the special unit forces, whatever it was called. Stop. Stop.
But can't eat a chicken wing. But anyway, so.
Oh my God. Come on, Wing.
Come on, Wing. But to wrap that up, it's just the chokehold, and it just needs to be let go. Like, these men have experienced a lot. They've overcame a lot. The point of a come up story is to eventually come up. That's the whole point. We don't a Cinderella story, which is another way to call it. Eventually Cinderella comes up out of that struggle, because otherwise it's just abuse. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, otherwise it's just abuse, and nobody wants to read or look at a story that's just abuse constantly or struggle constantly. And that is not hopeful. That's not inspiring. It may be entertaining and it may give you like righteous rage, but that's not their story. And I think we're in a space, and again, this is the first album back from a long hiatus and in a new era. And people act like this was the last album they're ever going to fucking make. Like, if you didn't like this one, cool, fine. There's going to be many more after this. Yoongi's already said we're going to be in basically walkers and wheelchairs before they decide to retire. So there'll be another
Learning
one. Learning instruments, being a full BTS, the real band, you know, the with Namjoon on the sax. Anyway, so yeah, I just feel like people obviously will get over it. I mean, clearly it's been, what now? Was it a month since all this has went down? And people got over it. People are moving on to the next thing. And now, of course, there's another thing that people are upset about or, you know, up in a rage about. It's always going to be something. And I think it's unfortunate that BTS feels, to us, those of us who don't have this strange relationship with their music and their journey, who want them just to express themselves in a way that's authentic and a way that makes sense to the time that they're in. I don't want BTS talking about the shit they were talking about during Danger. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Now, it can reflect on those things. It can make parallels to those things, but I don't want the same fucking project over and over and over. I will get bored. Most people do get bored. You know what I'm saying? It's natural. People, I mean, I understand people have their comfort things, but like, those albums still exist. Like, just go listen to them. It's okay. Like, I promise. I mean, clearly, we'll probably talk about this too. They definitely have the streams. It didn't hurt. If you decide to take a break from the album, it didn't affect the streams much, because they, you know, got all these accolades that we'll touch on later. But yeah, it's been a strange. But as I was talking to, again, because I'm not a newer ARMY, but I'm new in context, right? Came in during Black Swan, which was Map of Soul, and I haven't seen, this is my first official release, like full release with them. And from what I hear from other ARMY who have been here since, you know, they were, you know, conceptual thing, this happens every comeback. You know, this, maybe not in this extent, but something like this. This isn't the BTS I know tagline. You know, all of these points have been brought up before. It's just, I think when we talked about this, because of the surge in interest, it just is a lot louder. And it's funny to me that it seems like people who are newer to this and the people who are looking on the outside in, they're enjoying this project. And it feels like a lot of people who, again, know the old BTS, quote unquote, are the ones that are the most upset, which I find that kind of funny.
It's funny and it's very interesting, because I do feel like that also goes into when BTS was more like K-pop than like the global group that we know them of now. Because like, we have to be honest, at this point, they are considered a global group in my eyes. And I feel like that also goes into just like people not, and BTS talked, like Namjoon talked about this in the beginning of the documentary too. This is an instance where they've surpassed the limit that K-pop puts on groups and idols, where a majority of the time, unless you're Super Junior, which I don't understand how, but a majority of the time your shelf life is like 25, 26, maybe 27. Usually once you get out of military, it kind of fades out of like the idol life or like the K-pop group and the K-pop music. You may still be with your group, but like y'all aren't really making group music. You're doing more individual activities. So for a group that is like BTS, who also too because of the fans. And I was watching the Zane Lowe interview. I didn't take any notes on it, but I was watching it before we came on here. And I know he kind of asked a question similar to that. And it was Jungkook who talked about like they all decided to go together instead of separate out their years, because that's what most groups would do. They would, when it's time for them to go to enlistment, they would go. Some of the members would do their activities. That member may come back and then the next member goes on. This is the first time as well. Well, no, because I know there's been other groups that went together and came back. But as far as like a group on the scale of like BTS, like they decided, because not only for the fans, but because they literally at this point do consider each other family, which, you know, you try not to say with everyone because not all groups are like that. Some people see them as coworkers, but with them, they've said it multiple times. They do see each other like family. They've decided to go at a time to where they could come back all together to hurry up and make music for the fans. And it's also interesting, too, because there was a Billboard article that came out with Bong PD. And I think he talked about when he was talking with Namjoon and Jungkook and asked them about the song Writing Camp. And they decided to go. And then again, with the whole like, we need to protect BTS, people were complaining that like they rushed them into starting this album too soon. It's like, weren't y'all also, when they were gone, talking about like how you're ready for them to come back? Because I'm sure you would have. Actually, there was people complaining. At least Namjoon talked about on his one live, which all of 2025, they thought they were going to release something and they didn't release something and people were complaining about it. So you would have been complaining even more if they took like a full year break and then came back with an album. No one's ever happy. I mean, that's the bottom line to all this. But I'm just bringing up like the talking points of how like they contradict each other and like how they're hypocritical. It's like y'all say one thing, but then I know you're going to say the opposite if it didn't turn out this way. Kind of like what Shay said, which is true. Like this happens every comeback. I don't know if for me, like it just seems louder, maybe because I'm more on social media. Like before I was like back then, I wasn't as much. It was really Twitter, but my timeline's kind of curated. Y'all are talking about you missed, obviously Love Yourself and like Map of the Soul and like bring back Black Swan. Excuse me. Black Swan was my favorite from the beginning, but I distinctly remember that hate train for Black Swan, especially with the promotions of like Artist Death. And they put out like a dance video, not of BTS, but of one of like dancers from like a well-known ballet school. I don't. Yes. And that version is
the orchestra version,
which I'm still upset to this day. It's never been released on streaming. Like, dang, what are we doing, Big Hit Hype? But anyway,
we're not mad enough.
I guess not.
We're not mad enough.
We're not. But when the original version came out, people were like, this is too hip hop. This is too trap. I thought this was supposed to be sentimental. And I'm like, I remember all this. So it's a pattern.
Anybody who didn't like Black Swan on first, that if your soul did not ascend when Black Swan was released, I feel like you're just dead inside, because I literally will unfriend you if you think that Black Swan is not a masterpiece, the original, because it is. So
listen, I still keep saying it should have won that Grammy, but again, we ain't got time for that.
We have the Grammys is something we don't want to talk about right
now. Well, we might have to talk about it again real soon, especially with this new album, because I'm seeing stuff. So yeah,
for sure, man.
Yeah, I was done with that. I didn't know if you wanted to add on to that.
We've, I mean, other than, kind of my final thoughts on the album's reception. I think the way that it was laid out, as far as like promotions, the album release, then the documentary with the Netflix special, into all of the interviews, the millions of things that they've done. I find it funny that one of the sentiments I think around the way things are released is like, oh, well, the documentary should have came out first. I'm like, no, it shouldn't have. And other than the fact that it would have been dumb, because then we would have gotten spoiled, because there's clearly so many spoilers in the documentary. But even if they edited that out, you should not need context of something for then it to resonate with you. If it doesn't resonate with you, it just doesn't resonate with you. And that's okay. Like, everything doesn't have to be curated for you specifically. This ain't about you specifically. This album wasn't about you, the person. It was us, the collective. It was them and their story and how that ties into them today. We center ourselves a lot. I think the individual fan, the ones who have such, again, I'm not saying that this album doesn't have valid criticism. I think there are some things that, I can understand and respect that, certain things, and we'll talk about it later. What I can't respect is you need somebody to hold your hand and basically spoon feed you to understand things and not take the time and let something marinate. I can't think of an album that I loved immediately on first listen. No album that I've ever listened to, and I'm a huge music person. I can't think of an album that was like, this is an instant classic. And I have a lot of instant. I have a lot of classics now on my in my repertoire of what I would consider a classic album or a classic body of work. But did I like it at first? Probably not right off rip, because you have to let things. And we talked about this in Discord. I told Discord, the way that I listen to music is the same for every album. I listen to it a minimum of 3 times, and I listen to it in different media. Once like with regular like headphones, or something that or just from the speaker from the phone. Like I was at home when this dropped, and so I just put my in-ears in, or my earbuds in, and listen to it that way. And that way wasn't as good as it was when I put it in the speakers of my car. Totally different experience. And then was able to put it through the speakers in my TV with Samsung, sponsor us. Being able to listen to it, and when we go, because we're going to the Vegas show, I'm doing a ghetto listening party because we're going to go to a karaoke spot and listen to it that way. Because, and again, then getting it in the concert, every experience and every way that you listen to a project, it changes. There are things that you'll notice that you didn't notice with just listening to it from your phone, and you listen to it one time through your phone, and so you can give it that listen, so you can make that video. But if you don't take the time to let something marinate, regardless if you like the group or not, I think that you're doing yourself a disservice by just writing it off as like, oh, this is just trash because I listened to it one time on my shit ass iPhone, that the speaker wasn't made to capture the things that were clearly just very detailed in this album, which we'll jump into later on. And again, I don't think any album is above critique. I don't think that like the rollout was above critique. I don't think that certain choices that were made were above critique. But some of the things that I've seen, and obviously now we're a little further ahead in the future of this release, it's just lazy. It's lazy. It's disingenuous. It's kind of disappointing that people don't really give a fuck to listen to like full bodies of music anymore. And that's not just BTS, that's across the board. Like a lot of my favorite artists talk about this a lot. Like people don't want to listen to full bodies of work, listen to something front to back. There's not a moment that I've listened to this album that I'm jumping around. Even now, almost a month later, I'm still, when I put this on, I start with body to body, and I end with Into the Sun. And I even listen to the bell. Like, because
you gotta listen to the bell.
You have to listen to the bell. You need that cleanser. You need those hertz to get in there and like align your chakras or some shit. But yeah, moving into, like obviously when we talking about the album, I think if you made it this far into this almost 2-hour part of the podcast, everything's not going to be for you and everything's not curated for you specifically. So take yourself out of it, put yourself in the shoes of the people who make these things, and also just give things more of a chance than you would just, unless you just absolutely hate it because you just don't like BTS. I'm not even talking to you. But anybody who uses the excuse of this isn't the old BTS, this is riddled. I would argue this is the most authentic BTS album that we've gotten in a long time. Yeah, and I'll stand on that. And, I've had people tell me, you must listen to BTS. I've listened to every BTS song that's available. And even the stuff that isn't. Like, what I'm saying? The stuff that isn't available. I've gone through the SoundClouds and the YouTubes that have the old songs that came from mixtapes. I've done my time. And I would still say that this is one of the more authentic album because it's not placating to a theme. It's not making things easy for you to be able to understand, even though it should be because it's in English, most of it. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to grow. You got to either grow with them or you're going to be very uncomfortable. Or you're, using a metaphor. When it's time to, depot plant, you keep it in there, it's going to get real cramped and the roots are going to grow outside of it and your plant's probably going to suffer. But, you have to move with the pot. You have to take the pot and move from the small pot to the bigger pot. And if you don't move with it, you're going to be uncomfortable and cramped and unhappy. Everything's always going to be wrong and nothing's going to be the way you want it to be. So move with it, man. That's all I can say.
honestly, I don't have any more to put into that. So I think Shay pretty much ended it that way, well, on the same sentiment that I feel. So yeah, we're just gonna, out of the whole thing, just brand, do better. Fans, if you don't like it, just don't listen to it. You don't have to hold on to something you don't like anymore, because it starts becoming like a visual hatred, and you're just going to make yourself miserable. It's okay to let things that don't serve you anymore go. And yes, you will go through a grieving process. I'm not saying that's going to be easy, but like at the end of the day, if you do want to make it about you and like not BTS, you got to do what's best for you. So if it's letting them go, it's okay to let them go, grieve, and then just move on to things that's going to satisfy you in the way you want things to be handled.
Amen and amen. Amen and a lady.
Yeah. So yes, thank you, Shay, for joining me talking about these controversies. I know it's been a lot, especially since we've talked about them literally at this point to death.
Beating this bitch to the ground.
I just wanted to make sure we get it out there, because I feel like it'd be a disservice for myself as well, and just this podcast, because like you stated way at the beginning, we got to talk about the uncomfortable stuff. That doesn't mean I love BTS any less. I didn't blame BTS for any of this. They didn't do anything themselves to like bring this on, but like, you know, someone's got to talk about it, and hopefully it reaches the right place. Hopefully in their conquest or their journey of breaking out into the West more, we get, you know, like, is this diversity like higher the word at this point? I don't know.
Just put somebody black in Hive, okay? Just put somebody from the projects in Hive to make sure. No, not the projects, but you know what I mean. Put somebody.
put someone with a degree with like cultural sensitivity in there. Yes.
And a woman specifically, a black woman. Put a black woman in Hive today. Thank you.
Yes. So on that note, we'll go ahead and end it there so we can go ahead and talk about the album. But thank you for listening to this part of the extravaganza. You can email us at iwasthinkingpod@gmail.com. You can also comment, I know, on like Spotify on this episode specifically, on anything, like your thoughts on what we just talked about. You can follow us on all social media on I Was Thinking Pod. And we'd really appreciate if you rate us the highest ratings on whatever platform you're listening. So I have been your host, Simone, and this has been my lovely guest, Shay, who will come back to talk about the album. And we will see you then. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.